For a little bit more on this, we're now joined by the Western Cape's MEC for Community Safety and Police, Reagen Allen. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the programme.
Peter, I am delighted to be speaking to you this evening. It is so vital because we have engaged all our districts and we are so committed together with stakeholders to do everything in our power to eradicate crime within our communities.
All right, let's talk about who you engaged with. Do you feel that you were able to reach enough of the population to get a fair understanding of the size of the challenges and the problems?
I feel extremely satisfied on the one angle because we have seen, Peter, in all the districts, top senior management within the South African Police Service were present. We have fostered those valuable working relationships to ensure that, yes, we have an oversight role. Yes, we are needing to make recommendations. We do monitoring and evaluation, but it is so key to have working relationships with the South African Police Service. We had the CPFs, we had neighborhood watches, and Peter, we have 16,000 neighborhood watches across our province. They were represented, we had various stakeholders, but since my appointment, I've also made it clear that we need each and every Western Cape government department to be represented. Because I know, Peter, education, cultural affairs and sport, finance, social development, all our departments have a role to play towards making our communities safer.
I know that you still have quite a bit of time to put the report together, collate all the information, but I'm sure that there are some themes that have started to come through already that are sort of ringing lights for you.
Indeed, we have consistently seen when there is skewed allocations, and that ultimately means where certain areas and some of our leafier areas, Peter, would have a police to population ratio of 1 officer for every 250 residents. But in our poorer communities, in our underprivileged areas, it would be 1 officer for almost 1,000 residents, and that skewed allocations we want addressed. We are also wanting to make sure that the amount of known drug houses within our communities are actually shut down so that we can start to dismantle organized crime in that particular fashion, but also human resources that is placing a burden on the South African Police Service, and the dedicated officers in our province are doing the job of 2, 3 or 4 additional people because we are so under-resourced. So that is on the one hand, but what we have also seen is that the collaboration with our partners, I'm wanting to see that there's greater relationships, that we are actually making headway. We have already placed our LEAP officers, which is in terms of the Western Cape Safety Plan, where we have ultimately stepped up, we have stepped in to put extra boots on the ground to ensure that the needs is actually addressed. And that is an unfunded mandate from the department, because we are ideally as a government calling for SABC and the powers that is resting at the national level to be closer to the people, to be at provincial level, so that the needs and priorities can actually be taken into account.
Reagen, when I hear you speaking, I've got to say, a lot of what you're saying sounds like last year's report, where you talk about a shortage of human and physical resources in the province, a problem that goes back to 2014. That's what the report was saying. So the question is, how optimistic are you that this exercise actually is useful?
Peter, I would always want to subscribe and to fulfill the mandate. The mandate currently is that we are needing to compile the policing needs and priorities for the province. We make those recommendations, we monitor and we evaluate. From where I'm sitting, Peter, I have seen that the policing needs and priorities are not taken into account to a level that will satisfy me. I'm in this particular position now for the last 9 months. And I've made it clear to the South African Police Service that we have the legal framework to actually institute an intergovernmental dispute where we can ultimately compel the South African Police Service via the courts in order to take our policing needs and priorities into account. You would be aware, and viewers will also be aware, that in a case where the Department of Transport at the national level was compelled by the court recently in order to put measures in place so that the long distance bus routes can actually be protected. I am willing to go all the way in that regard because I don't want to have a talk shop. I don't want to do it year on year and fulfill that constitutional mandate and have a tick box. I actually want to see change, and that is something that I will consistently also call for, to ensure that the needs and the priorities are taken into account. I speak to so many SABC officers. They tell me how overworked they are, how overburdened they are. Our detectives in our province are carrying a caseload of 250 dockets per detective. So we would want to see the needs and the detective under-resourcing to be addressed, and I'm willing to go all the way in order to ensure that once a intergovernmental dispute is lodged, to actually take it all the way, because we are wanting to fight for the residents and for our dedicated law enforcement and SABC officers here in the province.
It sounds as if the police officers on the ground pretty much are on your side in terms of the need. So what is national head office of the police saying in terms of not being able to or not willing to deploy the necessary resources?
In my engagements with SABC at the national level, Peter, I often remember 2020. 2020, in the height of under-resourcing as well, there was 11.5 billion rand, 11.5 billion rand that was taken from departments like justice, like police, like the NPA, in order to fund a failing state-owned entity like SAA. So we've seen over the years, when funding is taken from key departments that should be able to place additional boots on the ground and ensure that the justice system actually work, is largely to a extent which leaves many SABC officers crying out for help, wanting us to do more, etc. So from my side, I'm honestly, Peter, wanting to foster that relationship with the National Minister of Police, where we can have those discussions, but it's so difficult. We are all aware of state capture. We are all aware of looting. We are all aware of a shrinking envelope in terms of the actual budget that is allocated to provinces. But that is a fight that we continue to have, and it's unable. Peter, I'm unable to go to a community that has called a van, and they say that no one came out. And when we engage the South African Police Service, the van might not have been available because it's only one in that particular precinct. To me, growing up in Mitchell's Plain, that's totally unacceptable. It's a thing that we have stepped up to put these extra boots on the ground, and we have an extra 1,000 law enforcement officers that the Western Cape government, without a mandate in terms of policing, have actually already put on the ground to help that effect. But it's a conversation that the Premier has also taken up with the President of the country. And in October, the Premier again handed the previous year's PNP reports over to the President as well.
Earlier on, you mentioned this disproportionate deployment of police resources, the ratio between citizens and the police officers allocated. This sounds almost like apartheid era type of deployment. Why hasn't that been addressed in the years of democracy?
Peter, in 2018, the Equality Court found that the theoretical human resource requirement that is currently being used by the South African Police Service to effect deployment was skewed. It discriminated against Black and poorer communities here in the Western Cape. That current case is still ongoing in the Equality Court. But like you have also indicated, we have seen year on year skewed allocations. I'm consistently engaging SABC in that regard. There has been, over the last 9 months, some shifts from certain stations to some of our more under-resourced stations, but it's still not at a certain level that will leave me satisfied or the men and women in blue in the province totally satisfied, because we know you are walking this particular road in order to see one community and taking from a community that is better resourced to a different area, but then those communities will also then be upset that they have now less members, etc. So it's from our side, we are wanting to be as fair as possible. We are wanting to tackle the issues head on, because the working relationships and us being around the table, sitting together, seeing that this does not make sense. We need to address Khayelitsha, Harare, our priority stations, and the SABC members that we are working with is also echoing the fact that they would even be willing in order to be moved to other areas in terms of the need. So it's something that I'm continuously working with SAPS in this regard. And I'm looking forward to actually compiling the report ahead of time so that we can be be ahead of the curve to see how we can foster those working relationships. And Peter, and I must mention this, it is on record as a province, we have been consistent over a number of years to compile the reports. We don't want to delay, we don't want to negate our mandate in that regard when other provinces don't even actually compile their policing needs and priorities.
MEC, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and let's hope that this report gets the attention and also the response that it deserves. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Peter. We will continue to fight outside.
Thank you.
For you and for everyone.
Thank you so much, and good night.